Welcome to the Motherhood Alliance podcast, the podcast dedicated to empowering moms and families on their health and wellness journey. I'm Brittany Suttner.
And I'm Andrea Rinkus. Together, we're here to explore holistic approaches that go beyond conventional medicine.
Each week, we dive into topics that matter most to you. Everything from nutrition and mental health to alternative therapies and natural living.
And whether you're a new mom navigating the early stages of parenthood or a seasoned pro looking for new ways to support your family's well-being, you're in the right place.
Even better, all of our guests are local small business owners who you can actually talk to and work with. You can learn more about today's guest and connect with hundreds of other health and wellness professionals through our informative and easy-to-use directory at motherhoodalliance.com.
Before we get started, keep in mind that this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for personal healthcare advice. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any changes based on the podcast content.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Are you ready to help your family thrive? Let's get started. Hi, we are Britt and Drea from motherhoodalliance.com, and we are excited to welcome you to a 4-episode series with Corinne Zuleger, a certified brain health trainer, neuroencoding specialist, advanced certified trauma practitioner, John Maxwell leadership team member, yoga instructor, and empowerment coach. Additionally, she is trained in subconscious and hypnosis work and serves as a licensed teaching partner with Empowered Living. Corinne's coaching approach is rooted in her signature framework, the 6 Anchors of Wholeness, and she specializes in helping moms and women who feel overwhelmed, disconnected, or unfulfilled, often weighed down by guilt, perfectionism, self-doubt, or hidden grief. As you'll hear in her episodes, her mission is deeply personal, which is why she is so passionate to help women break free from negative self-talk, past traumas, and anxiety over the future. Outside of her coaching, Corinne hosts the Secret Keep Hers podcast and cherishes time spent with her husband of over 30 years and their 3 grown kids. We hope you are ready to learn as much as we did from Corinne. Let's jump into today's episode.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Motherhood Alliance podcast. We are back here with Corinne, and we are so excited to dive into this episode, especially following the last one where we talked about rewiring your brain and breaking free from the guilt and the perfectionism, the overwhelm of being a mom and just a human in general. In this episode, we're going to be talking something, it's called ants. And we're going to be talking about some of the techniques that you had referenced in the first episode. We're going to be talking about what those are and kind of how to apply that to our lives and practice that in everyday life too. So can you explain what ants are and why is that important?
So ants are something that Dr. Daniel Amen coined. They're automatic negative thoughts. And so this is your inner critic voice. This is, your life is humming along, and then all of a sudden something pops into your mind, and that would be the automatic negative thought. There are many different types of ants. And just to kind of quick go over some of them, that they're all or nothing thinking. This is where we're extreme thinking, like all good or it's all bad, and there's never a middle ground.
And these could be thoughts where you're applying it to yourself or you're applying it to others, a situation or others. Okay.
Others, the world around you. Sure. And this could be like, I'm not perfect, right? So therefore I'm a failure because, it's got to be perfect. Always or never, you hear this when people talk, and I really pick it up so much more is it's always this way. Oh, yes. It's always that way. And it's, it's never, he never, she never. And when you're listening, now I'm like, I say, always. Right? Because it's not always that way. The focusing on the negative, we're programmed that way. So, like say somebody compliments you, and you could get 100 compliments, but somebody says one thing, and that's what we focus in on. It's like, well, the need to be perfect. Fortune telling ants. These particular ants are, I predict the worst possible outcome. I catastrophe it, right? It's like I've got the crystal ball, and I can already see that really terrible thing is going to happen. I'm just like, I just know the meeting is going to go terrible. Or the kids, I think, say these sort of things,
Yes.
right? It's going to, like, I'm going to fail at that. And, so they're groomed to, I think kids just in collective, right? Mind reading ants. This is believing that you know what somebody else is thinking.
Yeah.
And that's a good one. Because my husband and I have been together for 33 years, and I'm good, but I'm not that good, right?
I was really hoping we'd be able to read our spouse's
I
minds by
know,
now in
I
some
know.
ways, or at least they could read my mind when I want something to be completed.
I feel like I can read your mind better than
Yes.
my, and vice
It's
versa.
the sister
It's a
bond, I
it's
guess.
a sister thing.
That's 100% true.
Is
'Cause,
it?
Yes, it
Oh,
is.
yeah.
Yes, it is. Just from the biological standpoint and the shared cells that you two have, that you can definitely. Oh, I got little goosies thinking about that. So yeah, I'm with my sister. We're like, people thought we were twins because we literally could complete each other's sentences and stuff. But that's.
Well, I definitely know what you're thinking sometimes.
Yeah.
We just know.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
However,
Yeah.
mind reading ants can get us into trouble. Okay, so she didn't say hi to me, so she must not like me. Right? We just don't know what people are thinking. Thinking with your feelings. Assuming that your negative feeling is what is the truth. And the truth really lies somewhere in the middle, right? We have a universal law, the law of polarity, right? We have, good and bad, and then there's everything on the continuum in between. So I feel worthless, so I must be worthless. That's not true. Guilt beating ants. I think this one's a big one with moms.
Oh gosh.
Right. Shoulds, musts, ought to. I don't know how many people say ought to anymore, but I should. Oh, should. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. When what you need to be shoulding is you need to sit down, relax, put your feet up for 15 minutes and do some breathing. Labeling ants. We will see this with kids, right? I'm so stupid. He's stupid. And I'm such an idiot because I did this thing, or he's a jerk. Personalizing ants. These ones are taking responsibility for things that aren't your fault. That definitely moms do, right? It's like something happens to the kids and, well, of course it had to be me.
Yeah.
That one I can tell you I took on a lot. The blaming ant, and we see a lot of this one in our society as a whole. Instead of owning your piece of it, there's that. It's so much easier to project the blame out. It's my fault. My life is a mess. Or his fault. My life is a mess. Is it his fault? Because everything is choice, right? So we do what we do. So those would be the ants.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I see that, and my kids do almost every single one of those, and I know I've done every single one of those in the past, and I have a lot to work on.
So I think the big question is, and the title of this episode is, how do we rewire these when we are constantly bombarded with this negative self-talk?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing about the inner critic and that voice in there is we get to question it. We talked in the last episode about its thought, feeling, action, result, right? As I think, so I feel. As I feel, so I do. As I do, so I have. So we want to be able to take the thought and change it. We want to give it a new face. And so in that, you can practice something called the stop technique. And so, so one of the fun things that I do with the inner critic is I like to give it a name, right? So it's kind of, right? If you can give it a name, it becomes kind of real to you. So when I start to hear the little voice in my head that's telling me some lame thing like, Like, I really want to do this thing. And then the little voice comes in and says, oh, are you really sure? Like, you might screw up. And, all of the stuff starts, are you worthy enough of that? And the little voice, and her name is Nancy.
Okay.
And I named my Nancy because Nancy is negative. She has a couple of friends that she likes to bring along. So sometimes she brings Judy, and Judy's really judgy, or Victoria, because Victoria can be kind of vicious, right? So I give them these fun little names because when it pops up, then I'm like, oh, there's Nancy, right? And I stop her.
I love that. Like, I love that idea of doing that.
Just give them a name. But the stop technique this is a series. So stop is an acronym. So, for example, you've got a thought and it's looping through your head. And remember, we don't want it to take root in us. So we need to stop it so that it doesn't have that opportunity. And so the stop technique is, I'm going to shout stop. And I know it's not always the easiest to shout it out in public without having people look at you. But you can shout it in your head, because even saying the word stop, you're going to say stop. You're going to stand up, because when you do that movement, have you ever gone into the other room to grab something?
Oh, gosh.
Got up quick. You're like, oh, I got to go get whatever. And you go to the room and then you're like, oh, I forgot what I came in here for. Okay.
Glad I'm not the only one.
You are
Happening
not the only
more than
that is
usual.
Actually, there's a scientific name for that. So that little blank spot that makes you think that you're losing your mind is actually called a scotoma. So that little blank spot gives us an opportunity to insert something new into there. Okay. So you stand up, you say stop, right? You're going to take a deep breath. That's the T. I like to put my hand on my heart. I take a nice deep breath. Then what's the outcome? The O is the outcome. What's the outcome that I really want, right? So in here is where because I want joy, I want peace, and so you think of something that brings you that. Maybe it's the sunset, maybe it's your kids, babies laughing, puppies, whatever it is. And as you're thinking about that, you're going to pump your fist and say, whatever it is, right? I want joy, I want peace. And then you're going to praise yourself. So the P is the praise. This is the celebration piece of it that we talked about in the last podcast, right? We don't celebrate ourselves enough, but this is I've interrupted that pattern. So that's really what this is. This is called a pattern interrupt. And the goal of it is to stop that little voice in its tracks. Because now, Nancy's moved on. And the repetition piece of that is what takes away her power. So the more
as soon as
I do
she
it,
starts speaking again, you just repeat this.
yes.
We're going to be marching around yelling stop a whole lot.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is kind of like a muscle that can be built then.
It's a repetition. It's practice. Yeah.
Yeah, she becomes easier to shut down. And what you can do, and I highly recommend this, is if you have something that triggers you on a regular basis, that pops up into your mind, like a Nancy voice that comes up pretty regularly, you can intentionally bring this on yourself. So you could sit and you could have that thought, the thought that gives you and puts you in an unresourceful state. So whatever the thought is, you purposely think the thought and then apply the stop technique and do it 10 times in a row, 3 times a day for a week. And by the time you get to the end of the week, you're going to be like, I don't even remember why I'm doing this, because the feeling that it was causing within your body will not, by the time you get to the end of that, it will no longer be anymore, because you have lessened the amplitude of the vibration. Because every time you change it, it's taking away Nancy's power. She no longer has that power, and it gets less and less and less. And then finally you've rewired the pattern within your brain, and She's no longer thinking that thought. Not that she's not going to think something else, but every time you do this, you can take down a different thought process that comes up on repetition.
I know you also talk about anchoring calm and joy. So is that kind of the next step, is you kind of stop the negative and then you anchor in the good?
Yes. That's all part of the process. And you have the ability to anchor in, peace, love, joy, patience, kindness, gentleness, right? All the fruits of the Spirit. You have that ability to anchor them into your body. And an anchor really is like a touching. So if you see me, you touch my heart, I'm anchoring. This is love. Love for me. This is also, if I touch my heart, this is just that reminder to me to take the pause. To take the deep breath, to remind myself that I am loved, that I do have peace, that I do experience joy in my life. Sometimes when we're in the heat of the moment, it can be easy to forget those things. So in the process of anchoring, right, in pattern interrupting, you want to go to those places that bring you the peace, that bring you the joy. Again, like I don't have to physically be out in nature to think about nature and now feel the peace that comes about me, or the awe, the wonder, the joy that comes from, the first sip of coffee in the morning, the smell of it. The more you bring those into this is the use of your imagination, right? I can do the stop technique. And in that, the outcome that I want, I can insert whatever it is that brings me peace, love, and joy. Bring something like that in. And the more I do that, the more that's what my brain is going to seek. You have a little piece in your brain called the reticular activating system. And that reticular activating system is like a heat-seeking missile. And it will look for whatever you tell it to look for. So before my feet even hit the floor in the morning, I lay in bed and I tell myself it's going to be an amazing day. Right? And so now my brain is like looking for all the ways it's going to be amazing today.
Mm-hmm. It's like framing, if you've heard the term framing, right? You can frame it initially and then you look for that. Is this, so everything that you're talking about here, I know you also talk about the 6 anchors. Is that related to the fruits of the Spirit, or is that different?
No, so this is something that I actually came up with as a framework for coaching, really looking at, how can I help other people find more peace in their life, right? And so through these 6 things, through appreciation, ease, rhythm, alignment, wonder, and joy. These are the things that, especially as moms, if you are a stay-at-home mom, that can be a relatively thankless job. If you are a mom in any capacity, right? So maybe you're a work from home mom. Maybe you're part-time. You all have different things that you guys do, right? So we have motherhood, let's say as an umbrella. And then we have the fact that you're not just a mom, air quotes, right? I hear people say, I'm just a mom. I'm like, oh, please, honey. You're like the scheduler, chief cook, bottle washer, grocery shopper. Like there's so many tasks that go into that.
We had one guest that came on and she said, I work full time as a mom. And I'm like, I love that.
I feel like people should be saying that.
Yeah, I work full time.
You
as
do
a mom.
work. You absolutely work.
And for often, it can be overlooked. It's like, as a mom, you have that whole job, and then you may work outside of the home as well, or inside of the home, and you're running all of the things, and we can forget the little things though that bring us joy. So this is about having that ability to see it. So I know a lot of people keep gratitude journals. Right? This is just even appreciation for what can I look around and what can I have appreciation for? I like to say like, I can be thankful for things that have happened. And then I can have gratitude for what's coming, be grateful for what I can see coming. The ease, the simplicity. This again, like, is moms are like, oh, everything needs to be perfect. And if the table doesn't look this way for the Thanksgiving dinner, or, if the Christmas tree doesn't look this way, or in all of those pressures that we put on ourselves, again, taking a step back and like, what is the most important thing? Honestly,
Yes.
I don't think our children, other than having pictures, really remember what the Christmas tree looked like.
No, they just remember the feelings.
The feeling of it,
that
right?
day,
So if I'm
yes.
anxious and I'm on edge because I want everything to be perfect, that creates that within them as well.
That's what they're going to remember.
That's what they're going to remember, right? Then there's the rhythm of life, right? This is providing yourself with the support structures. When somebody, if you have a newborn and somebody says, I will come over and clean your house or hold your baby, like, take them up on that, say yes, because people don't offer stuff like that unless they really mean it. But we're like, oh, no, I got it. I can do it all myself. I can shoulder it all. I can do it all. No, you can't, because you will break. You will break at some point. And then looking at the alignment piece of it. We talked about newborn stage, right? That newborn is a stage, and you're gonna, just messy hair, messy kitchen. The time right now is to nurture your body and your baby. And ask somebody else to come and help with the other stuff. Get some help with, or have your husband help. But that's temporary, right? Then we move into the other stages of it. And as we recognize that life is truly about the harmony, piece of it, that this alignment part, that you're not going to have balance. People say, oh, do I have good work-life balance? Sometimes, like in a newborn state, that's going to require you to have so much more on one end than the other, right? And then you get into the season of life that I'm in, and I have all the time in the world, right? And so if I were to look back at thinking, oh, somehow I'm not measuring up, and there's just not enough credit given to what it takes to raise a family. And to me, it was the most important job I had. But yet, when I went out and I would have conversation, I have one particular moment, and I was out with some, I had started to stay home, and I was out with some former colleagues at a wedding. And, the guy that I was talking to, he was listening to me, and I'm rambling about my kids because that's what I do all day. And this woman sat down next to him and said, oh, let me save you. I'm sure you're bored. And I was like deeply wounded in the inside of me, because it was like, wow, I know I'm not doing like great, corporate type things or whatever.
Yeah.
But I believed that I was doing the most important job, and I was raising human beings to be good human beings. So I'm very cognizant of that when I'm talking to other women about like what life looks like, because that's so important. But we get into, to wonder, can I do a look around, and do I see the beauty of the world? Can I go out and appreciate the flowers, the grass, even the snow that we get here in Wisconsin? And then joy, right? The fastest way to happiness is through joy. And what brings you joy? Make a list. Yeah. Like I said, puppies, babies, little babies' feet.
Oh gosh,
Oh my
yeah.
God, yeah.
Yeah, the smells of things. Yeah.
Yeah, like lilacs in the spring, the sunset, the sunrise, the sound of the waves of the water, any of those things, that, make a list of them. So sometimes, if you are having a day where you're like, nothing is right, nothing is working, you can grab your list and be like, you know what? There are all of these wonderful things out there, and I'm missing that because I got a quarter in my eye. My husband and I went to a retreat, a marriage retreat, very early in our marriage called A Weekend to Remember. And we, this gentleman, an older gentleman, talked about, he told the whole story about something, and he talked about the quarter in your eye. And he's like, everybody take out a quarter. And this was back when everybody carried cash. and he says, take that quarter and, hold it way out away from you. And he's like, see, it doesn't block anything out because it's way far away, right? But I'll take that quarter and put it in your eye. And then it's like, now you can't see one side of the story, right?
Yeah.
And so it was so powerful. And sometimes we'll say to each other, do you got a quarter in your eye right now? And it's all these years later, it's carried with us. Right? Because we can do that with life. So with, using stop techniques, reminding yourself that there is a lot to be grateful and thankful for out there in the world. Pattern interrupts, like we talked about, rewiring your brain to look for the beauty. What is it that you truly want at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm. And you shared your story a bit in the first episode, including hitting rock bottom. But that's not where your story ended. I'm sure it's been quite a journey to rewire your own brain. So just briefly, can you continue your story from where you were at rock bottom, and how did you start applying these techniques to get, you're not perfect today either, but you're a lot farther along. So
right. Well, perfection will come when I die, because there truly is no such thing as perfection within us as humans. We're here to evolve. My story really went on with me moving through and understanding what was happening with my body. Really, it was like I was emotionally, dysregulated. So the steps that I took were I went to therapy in the beginning. I was prescribed some medication. I took it for a while, and to the, where I got to a point where I felt really healthy. And I know we're going to talk about that kind of stuff later. But it took a series of events for me to finally get to the point where I was like, something really needs to change. And that would be, I lost my dad to substances, and then in 2006, and then in 2011, I lost my brother to substances. And it would take, the losing of my brother was really the sucker punch because it was out of the blue. And it would take that for me to really start to look inward and go, wow, why do these things happen? How do I change that? How do I change that, not just for me, but for my family? That grief process. And then it would continue on, continue to develop. Like I sought out my own life coach, things that I wanted to change in that way. I wanted to be, of course I want to be a good wife and mother. I had a pastor say, well, you want to be a good wife and mother, don't you? Well, of course I want those things. And in my mind, it meant it needed to look perfect. And so just continuing on with that journey and working through marriage, working through raising kids. But the grief processes were very pivotal in making changes in my own life. And probably the biggest one, 2021 was a big impact year for me. That in that particular year, I lost my best friend to cancer. I lost my mom to cancer. We had a very close family member pass away unexpectedly. I had 2 kids move to LA. One moved to New York City. And I was like, oh my goodness, right? But neuroencoding techniques really saved me from going over the edge, right? Being able to take that step back, allow myself to feel the feeling and have it move through me. It didn't get to be a squatter and take hold of me. So
that's amazing.
I love the way that you said that too. Yeah. You let it go through you. You acknowledge it and you let it go instead of holding it in. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And now you're doing that for other women, which is amazing. And I know that you are actually looking to start a women's group. So tell us about what that's going to look like.
So the women's circles are going to be just intimate groups. Maximum capacity is 10. They're going to be some gentle yoga stretching, some light teaching about, how, all the things women related, and how to, beliefs and how do we rewire our brains, and some sort of creative activity with some meditation and some what we call hot seat coaching. So an opportunity to, within the group, if you're comfortable, if there's something that you need some help with, being coached right there in the room that day. It would be 6 weeks, looking at it being on a Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. So, and you're in Appleton, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it would be in your home in Appleton.
In Appleton.
Small group. This sounds like a lot of women could really, really benefit. And just from everything that we've talked about so far in our first 2 episodes, like every single person, we are ingrained to have this negative self-talk. But I do find it interesting that when we look back on memories, we tend to think about the positive. Like when I think about my kids being babies, it's like this feeling. And even though I do remember the colic and the bouncing on the balls and being up all night long, we do think about the positive in history oftentimes.
Well, I was going to say not everybody does either, though.
No, I mean, for sure, certain situations is going to bring up some big traumatic challenges. But yeah, this was an amazing episode. Thank you so much for walking through all of those like tangible things that we can do to help us rewire this negative self-talk. For our listeners, we do have 2 more episodes coming up with Corinne. We're going to be talking about therapy, coaching, and subconscious work in our next one. And I'm excited to continue your story as well because you have such a powerful story. And then we're going to be talking about mom brain in our last episode. Like, you guys, this is a real thing. Let's talk about it. So we have some more great episodes coming up. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider leaving a rating or review or sharing it directly with a friend who could benefit from the information? We know that you're a busy mom or caregiver, and our goal is to make your life easier by bringing tips and tricks directly from experts into your earbuds. By sharing this episode with someone you love, you can play a critical role in helping to make their life easier as well. We appreciate your time, and thank you for being a part of the Motherhood Alliance family.